The forgotten nation in the Bible, the mysterious mission of the God-chosen Philippines. Have you ever wondered if your country is mentioned in the Bible? Could a small nation in the East hold a divine mission from God? It might sound unbelievable, but what if I told you that a forgotten nation, hidden in plain sight, could be part of God's grand plan? Imagine a land overflowing with gold, a nation with unshakable faith, and a people chosen to bring God's light to the world. We're talking about the Philippines. But this isn't just about national pride. This is about ancient prophecies, lost civilizations, and a mission that continues to this day. The Bible speaks of islands in the East glorifying God. It describes Ophir, the legendary land of pure gold, where King Solomon's ships sailed to collect unimaginable wealth. But could these scriptures be pointing to the Philippines? Could this nation, often overlooked in global politics, actually be one of the most important pieces in God's divine puzzle? And if so, why are millions of Filipinos scattered across the world, not just earning a living, but unknowingly fulfilling a greater purpose, carrying the gospel to nations where faith is fading? This story might just change the way you see the world. Stay with us until the end, because what you're about to discover is nothing short of mind-blowing. The islands in the East. Is the Philippines mentioned in biblical prophecy? The Bible has fascinated scholars, theologians, and historians for centuries, not just for its spiritual teachings, but for its prophetic nature. Some of its passages seem to reference lands far beyond the ancient world, hinting at places that were unknown at the time. One of the most intriguing questions that many have asked is, could the Philippines be one of these nations mentioned in Scripture? At first glance, it might sound like a stretch. The Bible primarily focuses on Israel and the surrounding nations. But when we dig deeper, we find verses that talk about distant lands, islands in the East, and places where God's name would be glorified. One of these key verses is Isaiah 24:15. Therefore, in the East, give glory to the Lord, exalt the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, in the islands of the sea. Isaiah specifically mentions the East and the islands of the sea. These aren't just poetic phrases in biblical language. Islands often refer to distant lands, far removed from the Near East. So the question is, are there any nations in the Far East that match this description? The Philippines consists of over 7,000 islands, making it one of the largest archipelagos in the world. It is located directly in the East when looking from the perspective of the ancient world. And here's where things get even more interesting. It is the largest Christian nation in Asia, with over 86% of its population identifying as Christians. The Philippines is thousands of miles away from Israel, yet it has become a major stronghold of Christianity. How does a country so distant from biblical lands become one of the most devoted Christian nations in the world? To understand this, we have to go back to 1521, when Ferdinand Magellan arrived in the Philippines. This marked the beginning of the country's relationship with Christianity. But this wasn't just about colonial influence, because while many former colonies abandoned Christianity after gaining independence, the Philippines held onto its faith and made it the foundation of its national identity. During the Spanish era, churches were built across the islands, and Christian teachings became deeply embedded. Unlike many other Asian nations, which reverted to their traditional religions, the Philippines embraced Christianity and never let go. Is that just history playing out, or could it be divine intervention? Here's something fascinating. Millions of Filipinos work abroad, from the Middle East to Europe to the United States, and no matter where they go, they take their faith with them. In the United States, Filipinos form some of the largest Christian communities, from Los Angeles to New York. In the Middle East, where Christianity is heavily restricted, Filipino workers secretly hold Bible studies, lead church gatherings, and share their faith despite the risks. They don't just leave home to earn money, they carry their faith with them and spread it to the world. Could it be that this isn't just economic migration, but a form of modern-day missionary work? The Bible speaks about God using the least expected to fulfill his plans. And this brings us back to Isaiah 24:15, a prophecy about islands in the east glorifying God. Think about it. The Philippines is an island nation in the east. It's one of the most Christian-dominated nations in the world. Its people carry the gospel to places where it's difficult for traditional missionaries to go. Does this sound like just a coincidence? Let's take another look at Isaiah 24:15. Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord. Exalt the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, in the islands of the sea. Let's check the boxes. A nation in the east, yes, the Philippines. A land of islands, yes, over 7,000 islands. A people glorifying God. Yes, 86% Christian, sending missionaries all over the world. Could it be that God has always had a plan for the Philippines? If you think about the modern world, power is centered around the strongest economies and political superpowers, places like the US, China, and Europe. These nations control global influence, technology, and military power. But that's not how God works. Throughout the Bible, God chooses the unlikely to fulfill his plans. He didn't pick Egypt, the world's most powerful empire, to lead his people. He picked Moses, a fugitive in the desert. He didn't choose a mighty warrior to defeat Goliath. He chose David, a shepherd boy. And he didn't choose a nation that was already Christian. He chose an island nation in the east to be his light in Asia. So here's the million-dollar question. Was the Philippines chosen by God to play a major role in the global Christian movement? And if so, what's next? If you're watching this, you might be wondering, so what does this mean for me? It means that maybe, just maybe, God's plan is bigger than we ever realized. Maybe he has a mission for the Philippines that is still unfolding, and maybe, wherever you are, you're also part of that mission. So what do you think? Is this all just a coincidence? Or could it be that Isaiah's prophecy is coming true right before our eyes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this mind-blowing, stick around, because the next part of this series is going to take things even deeper. The islands in the east. Is the Philippines a prophecy fulfilled? The Bible is filled with mysteries, hidden messages, prophecies that have yet to unfold, and nations whose destinies seem intertwined with God's grand plan. But what if one of those nations was the Philippines? I know what you're thinking. Wait, the Bible talks about the Philippines? It might sound far-fetched at first, but when you start connecting the dots, the possibility becomes almost undeniable. Let's start with Isaiah 24:15. Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord, exalt the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, in the islands of the sea. This verse has been overlooked for centuries, but take a closer look. It specifically mentions the east and the islands of the sea. If you were an ancient Israelite hearing this prophecy, you might assume it referred to islands near the Mediterranean or the Arabian Sea. But fast forward to modern geography, and one nation stands out: the Philippines. Think about it. The Philippines is a nation made up of over 7,000 islands, located in the Far East when viewed from Israel. Even more striking, it has one of the strongest Christian populations in the world. Over 86% of Filipinos identify as Christians. That alone makes it a major outlier in Asia, a continent dominated by Buddhism, Islam, and Hinduism. How did a country so distant from the Holy Land, surrounded by non-Christian nations, become one of the most devoutly Christian places on earth? Could this be mere coincidence, or is something bigger at play? Christianity first arrived in the Philippines in 1521, when Ferdinand Magellan landed on its shores. But here's where things get interesting. While many colonized nations abandoned the religion of their conquerors after gaining independence, the Philippines embraced Christianity and made it their own. That doesn't happen often. Look at China, Japan, or Vietnam. Despite European influence, they reverted to their traditional beliefs, but the Philippines remained steadfast in its faith. That alone should make you pause. Could it be that God preserved this nation for a reason? Now let's talk about something even more incredible. Millions of Filipinos live and work abroad, scattered across the Middle East, Europe, and the United States. But here's the thing, they don't just bring their labor, they bring their faith. In Saudi Arabia and the UAE, where Christianity is heavily restricted, Filipinos hold secret prayer meetings and underground Bible studies. In the US, they lead churches, ministries, and outreach programs from Los Angeles to New York. In Europe, Filipino caregivers and nurses aren't just supporting families, they're spreading the gospel through daily acts of love and service. Doesn't this sound exactly like something God would orchestrate? He doesn't always work through grand, flashy miracles. Sometimes he plants people in places where they are needed the most. And if you're in the US right now, chances are you've met a Filipino who has impacted your life in some way. Maybe a nurse at a hospital, a co-worker, or a friend who introduced you to their faith. Now ask yourself, was that just by chance? Isaiah 24:15 isn't the only verse that hints at this. Look at Isaiah 42:4. The islands will wait for his law. Again, which islands? Which nation of islands has embraced Christianity so deeply? Which nation continues to spread the gospel, even in places where it is persecuted? The more you think about it, the clearer it becomes. The Philippines is fulfilling these prophecies in real time. Now let's zoom out and look at how God works throughout history. If you study the Bible, you'll notice a pattern. He never chooses the obvious candidates. He didn't pick Egypt, the superpower of its time, to carry out his mission. Instead, he chose a group of Hebrew slaves. He didn't pick a mighty warrior to defeat Goliath. He chose a shepherd boy named David. He didn't pick Rome to spread Christianity at first. He started with a small group of fishermen and tax collectors. So why should it surprise us that he would choose a small island nation in the East to carry his light to the world? God doesn't work the way humans expect. He picks the humble, the overlooked, the underestimated, and he uses them to accomplish great things. And maybe, just maybe, he is doing that with the Philippines. So what does this mean for us? It means that maybe, just maybe, God's plan is bigger than we ever realized. Maybe he has a mission for the Philippines that is still unfolding. And maybe, wherever you are, you're also part of that mission. So let me ask you this. Do you believe this is all just a coincidence? Or could it be that Isaiah's prophecy is coming true right before our eyes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this mind-blowing, stick around, because the next part of this series is going to dive even deeper into biblical mysteries that might just change the way you see the world. The mystery of Ophir. Is the Philippines Solomon's lost treasure? For centuries, one of the greatest mysteries in biblical history has been the legendary land of Ophir, a place so rich in gold that King Solomon himself sent ships to retrieve its precious treasures. But the location of Ophir remains unknown, lost to history and debated by scholars. Some believe it was in India, Africa, or even South America. But one theory stands out. Could the Philippines be the lost land of gold that Solomon sought? In 1 Kings 10:22, the Bible states, "The king had a fleet of trading ships at sea, along with the ships of Hiram. Once every 3 years it returned, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks." This verse holds a key clue. Gold from Ophir wasn't just any gold. It was renowned for its purity. Gold has always been a symbol of wealth, power, and divine blessing even today. Just look at Fort Knox in the United States, where America stores billions of dollars worth of gold to back its economic power. Now imagine a place so wealthy in gold that it became legendary in the Bible. That was Ophir, but here's where things get interesting. Many scholars dismiss the idea that Ophir could be in Southeast Asia, but history tells a different story. Long before the Spanish arrived, the Philippines was already known for its vast gold deposits. The indigenous people of Luzon and Mindanao were master goldsmiths, mining gold from rivers and mountains and turning it into intricate jewelry. When Ferdinand Magellan landed in Cebu in 1521, he recorded in his journal that the local people wore gold as part of their daily attire. Even commoners had gold jewelry, something unheard of in most societies at the time. The Spanish were astonished. Gold was everywhere. Chiefs and rulers were adorned with golden ornaments, and gold was even used as currency. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence is the Surigao treasure, a collection of pre-colonial gold artifacts discovered in the Philippines. These artifacts, gold death masks, necklaces, and ceremonial ornaments, prove that Filipinos had access to abundant gold resources. Long before European explorers arrived, the craftsmanship of these artifacts was so refined that they matched the quality of goldsmithing in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. If the Philippines had this much gold, could it have been the Ophir that Solomon's ships visited? Skeptics argue that the Philippines was too far for ancient ships to reach, but historical records suggest otherwise. Ancient maritime trade was more advanced than we think. The Austronesians, seafarers from Southeast Asia, had already established trading routes connecting the Philippines, India, and the Middle East centuries before King Solomon's time. Historical records confirm that ancient Southeast Asian civilizations engaged in trade with the Middle East and China, proving that long-distance sea voyages were not only possible but common. And here's another clue: peacocks. The Bible specifically mentions that Solomon's fleet brought back peacocks from Ophir, but here's the problem. Peacocks are not native to Africa, another proposed location for Ophir. Instead, they are native to India and Southeast Asia, including the Philippines. Could this be another hint linking the Philippines to the lost land of gold? Now let's step back and think logically. The Philippines had gold in abundance, a thriving ancient trade network, and even peacocks, which were exported to the Middle East. The timeline of Solomon's ships, returning once every 3 years, makes sense if they were traveling as far as Southeast Asia. Could all these connections be mere coincidences, or is there something bigger at play? Even if we assume that the Philippines was Ophir, the real question is, why does it matter today? The truth is, Ophir wasn't just about gold. It was a symbol of divine blessing. King Solomon was the wealthiest ruler of his time, but despite all his riches, he eventually realized that gold, wealth, and power are meaningless without God. In Ecclesiastes 1:2, he famously wrote, "Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless." This is profound. Coming from a king who had everything, he understood that material wealth is temporary and that the only thing that truly matters is faith in God. Look at today's world. We live in a time where people worship wealth. Billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are admired not for their character, but for their fortune. Society chases gold, money, and status, believing that these things define success. But the Bible warns us that gold can be lost, money can disappear, and power is fleeting. The real treasure isn't found in wealth. It's found in faith, integrity, and purpose. So let's ask the bigger question. If the Philippines was once Ophir, could it be that its real treasure was never its gold, but its people? Think about it. The gold of Ophir may be long gone, but the faith of the Filipino people remains unshaken. Today, the Philippines is not only a Christian stronghold, but also a nation exporting faith to the world. Millions of Filipinos working abroad aren't just sending money home, they are bringing the gospel to places where Christianity is restricted. Filipino workers in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other Middle Eastern nations quietly hold Bible studies in secret, risking persecution to share their faith. In the United States and Europe, Filipino immigrants are among the most active members of church communities, leading ministries and strengthening Christian congregations. They may not be traditional missionaries, but in a way, they are modern-day disciples, spreading the word of God wherever they go. Could it be that God's purpose for the Philippines was never about gold, but about its role in spreading the gospel to the nations? If so, then the Philippines is still fulfilling its divine mission, not as a land of material wealth, but as a nation of faith, resilience, and spiritual strength. What do you think? Was the Philippines the lost land of a fear, or is there an even deeper mystery behind its biblical connection? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this blew your mind, stay tuned, because in the next part, we'll explore the spiritual battle in the East and the Philippines' unexpected role in it. The spiritual battle in the East. Is the Philippines a frontline warrior in Christianity? In today's world, when we think of battles, we often picture military conflicts, political power struggles, and economic warfare. But the Bible reminds us that the greatest battle isn't physical, it's spiritual. The forces of light and darkness are clashing all around us, even though most people don't realize it. Ephesians 6:12 makes it clear, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." This isn't just metaphorical. This spiritual war is unfolding worldwide, and one of its most crucial battlegrounds is in a place that most people wouldn't expect, the Philippines. A small island nation surrounded by non-Christian strongholds, yet standing firm as the only Christian majority nation in Asia. Could it be that the Philippines is playing an essential role in the global war for faith, and if so, what does that mean for the world? One of the most striking signs of spiritual warfare is suffering and resilience. The Bible shows us time and time again that God's people are tested through hardship. If there's one nation that has been tested through fire and still stands strong, it's the Philippines. Take Super Typhoon Haiyan, Yolanda, in 2013. It was one of the strongest storms ever recorded, with winds reaching 195 mph and storm surges as high as 20 feet. Entire towns were wiped out, over 6,000 people lost their lives, and millions were left homeless. The devastation was catastrophic, on a scale similar to Hurricane Katrina, which ravaged the United States in 2005. In any other country, this level of destruction would have led to mass chaos. But in the Philippines, something extraordinary happened. Instead of descending into panic, people gathered in the ruins, knelt on the ground and prayed. Images of survivors standing in destroyed churches, singing hymns amidst the wreckage, went viral. The world watched in awe as a devastated nation refused to abandon its faith. The people didn't just rebuild their homes, they rebuilt their churches first. What kind of nation responds to disaster like this? What kind of people, after losing everything, still choose hope over despair? That level of resilience is not just cultural, it's spiritual. The Philippines is not just surviving these trials, it is standing as a testament of faith in the face of overwhelming adversity. Looking at the geopolitical and religious landscape of Asia, something becomes clear. The Philippines is alone in its faith. To the west, you have Indonesia and Malaysia, both heavily Islamic nations. To the north, you have China, where Christianity is aggressively persecuted. To the east, you have countries like Japan and South Korea, where Christianity exists but remains a minority. Yet in the middle of this, The Philippines stands as the only Christian majority nation in Asia. That shouldn't be possible. Christianity should have died out centuries ago, crushed by the dominant religions around it. But instead, it has flourished, becoming a beacon of faith in the East. That's not an accident. That's not just history. That is spiritual warfare in real time. And the Philippines has held the line for centuries. Here's something even more remarkable. While faith in the West is declining, churches are closing, and younger generations are walking away from Christianity. One group remains strong: Filipinos. Over 10 million Filipinos live and work abroad, and they're in almost every major country on earth. But here's the key: they aren't just workers. In the Middle East, where Christianity is restricted, Filipinos secretly hold Bible studies and conduct underground worship services. In Europe, where Christianity is fading, Filipino communities fill empty churches, revitalizing faith communities that were dying out. In the United States, Filipinos are deeply involved in church ministries, worship teams, and leadership roles, helping strengthen Christian communities. Filipinos aren't just migrants, they're missionaries in disguise. They are spreading the gospel in places where traditional missionaries are blocked, arrested, or even executed. This isn't just an economic migration, it's a divine deployment. Could it be that God has positioned the Philippines as his spiritual army? Now let's go even deeper: the end times. The Bible speaks of a final spiritual battle, a time when darkness and light will clash like never before. If we truly believe we're approaching this period, then look at the Philippines through a different lens. A small nation, surrounded by spiritual opposition, a people tested by fire, yet unwavering in faith, a global movement of Christians spreading the gospel in secret, even in restricted nations. Does this sound like an accident? Or does this sound exactly like the kind of nation God would use? Think about it. Throughout history, God has always used the unexpected to accomplish his greatest plans. He didn't pick Egypt, the world's greatest empire, to carry out his mission. He picked a group of Hebrew slaves. He didn't choose a mighty warrior to defeat Goliath. He chose a shepherd boy named David. He didn't rely on Rome's power to spread Christianity at first. He chose 12 ordinary men, fishermen, tax collectors, outcasts. So why wouldn't he choose a small island nation in the Far East to play a major role in the spiritual battle? If the Philippines is a spiritual stronghold, then the implications are massive. It means that the battle isn't just physical, it's spiritual. Filipinos working abroad aren't just sending money home, they're carrying faith to the nations. Every Filipino nurse, teacher, and caregiver could be a missionary in disguise. The future of Christianity might depend on nations like the Philippines. As faith declines in the West, nations like the Philippines are holding the line in the global spiritual battle. If this is true, then what's next? Could it be that the Philippines is meant to rise as one of God's strongest warriors in the last days? And if so, what lessons can the rest of the world learn from them? So what do you think? Is the Philippines truly a key player in the spiritual battle of our time? Could it be that God has been preparing this nation for something greater all along? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this shook your perspective, stick around, because the next part of this series will uncover even more biblical mysteries that could change the way you see the world forever. The Philippines' role in God's global mission, a city on a hill. Throughout history, God has chosen specific nations, individuals, and communities to play crucial roles in his divine plan. Some were great empires, others were small, seemingly insignificant places that ultimately changed the world forever. The question is, could the Philippines be one of them? Could this island nation, often overlooked on the global stage, be the city on a hill that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 5:14? You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. The idea of a city on a hill is powerful. In American history, this phrase was famously used by President Ronald Reagan, who described the U.S. as a beacon of hope and freedom for the world. But what if, in a spiritual sense, the Philippines is playing a similar role in the East? What if this small nation is not just a country, but a mission field, a lighthouse, and a launching pad for God's work across the world? When we think about Christian missionary work, we often picture Western evangelists traveling to remote villages in Africa or the Middle East. But in reality, some of the most effective and dedicated missionaries in the world today aren't traditional pastors or evangelists, they're Filipino workers. Over 10 million Filipinos live and work abroad, scattered across over 100 countries. But here's the key: they don't just bring their skills, they bring their faith. Many Filipinos working overseas are active in church ministries, Bible study groups, and charitable missions. They might have left their homeland for economic reasons, but wherever they go, they carry the gospel with them. In the Middle East, where Christianity is often restricted, Filipino workers organize secret prayer meetings, underground worship services, and Bible studies. In the United States, Filipino Americans are one of the most religious ethnic groups, heavily involved in both Catholic and Protestant churches, serving as pastors, choir members, and ministry leaders. In Europe, where church attendance is rapidly declining, Filipino immigrants are often the lifeline of struggling Christian communities. Filipinos aren't just migrants, they are missionaries in disguise. They are quietly keeping Christianity alive in places where faith is fading. That's not just a coincidence, that's a global movement orchestrated by God. Christianity is under attack. In America, faith is declining. Church attendance has dropped to historic lows, and younger generations are abandoning traditional religion. In Europe, massive cathedrals that once housed thousands of worshippers now stand mostly empty. In the Middle East and parts of Asia, Christians are actively persecuted, imprisoned, and even executed for their beliefs. But here's the twist. While faith is shrinking in the West, it is thriving in the Philippines. Despite economic struggles, despite natural disasters, despite political instability, Filipinos remain one of the most faith-filled people on earth. Could it be that God is using the Philippines as a fortress of faith, a nation that will help restore Christianity in places where it is dying? Think about this. The United States was once the world's leading sender of Christian missionaries, but as faith declines, fewer Americans are stepping into the mission field. Meanwhile, Filipinos, without formal missionary training, without large financial backing, are stepping up. They are bringing faith, not through massive crusades or TV evangelism, but through their daily lives, their work, their kindness, and their perseverance. Could the Philippines be a spiritual reinforcement, filling the gap as other nations drift away from God? It's easy to think that a country needs military power, economic dominance, or political influence to change the world. But God doesn't work that way. Throughout history, He has chosen the small, the weak, and the humble to accomplish His greatest missions. He chose Israel, a tiny nation, to bring forth the Messiah. He chose Bethlehem, a small town, as the birthplace of Jesus. He chose 12 ordinary men, not kings or scholars, to spread the gospel to the entire world. So why wouldn't He choose the Philippines to be a spiritual light in the modern era? If you think about it, the Philippines is already playing a unique role in global Christianity. But the world hasn't fully recognized it yet. Imagine what would happen if every Filipino working abroad embraced their role as missionaries. Imagine if the churches in the Philippines realized that their nation is not just a Christian country, but a launching point for global revival. Jesus told His followers, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation." Mark 16:15. That command wasn't just for pastors. It wasn't just for professional missionaries. It was for everyone. And today, Filipinos are fulfilling this command without even realizing it. If the Philippines is truly playing a divine role in God's mission, then the question is, what does that mean for you? If you're Filipino, do you see your daily work as part of God's plan? Whether you're a nurse in America, a construction worker in Dubai, or a student in Europe, your presence in that country might not be accidental. God might have placed you there for a reason. If you're not Filipino, what can you learn from their faith? In a time where many nations are abandoning Christianity, the Philippines is proof that faith can survive against all odds. Maybe the key to reviving Christianity in the West isn't more theology, debates, or politics, but a return to simple, genuine faith like the Filipinos have. Are you fulfilling your role in God's mission? The world is changing. The spiritual battle is intensifying. Christianity is declining in some places, but growing stronger in others. The question is, will you be part of the movement? Will you be part of the light? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this message resonated with you, stick around, because we have even more biblical mysteries to uncover in the next episode.